Good day, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion on the effects of online hate speech towards the LGBTI plus communities in Namibia. My name is Deyonce Naris, and I will be your moderator for the day. I am honored and joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Allow me to please introduce our panelists. Avasis Lucrecia, human rights activist. Rachel Cavasis, Director of Equal Rights for All Movement. Florence Chisuku, Director of Healing Wounds Namibia. And finally, Federico Lungs, independent media expert. The purpose of today's discussion is to explore profound impacts of online hate speech towards the LGBTI experience, to understand the broader societal implications and discuss effects of strategies to combat the violence experienced by LGBTI persons on the online platforms that they use. We will be examining the various angles, including legal, media, and their responsibility, and the community's resilience. So to kick us off, remember this is a conversation, right? I would like to propose some general questions to all of my panelists. So from a personal perspective, so you'll just share a little bit on initial thoughts on how online hate speech affects the LGBTI community. Let's start with that.
May I?
Yeah, sure. Anybody can go.
My initial thought is the online hate speech or the online hate affects the LGBTI community in a very, very bad way because of what is being said to them on social media, or because of what is going on in the country. People can go on social media, say whatever they say, and it spreads violence outside of social media also. So it affects us in a very, very bad way.
So it has negative impacts.
Yeah. Do you understand what hate speech is? You have a definition? Because we don't have a hate speech law in Namibia. There's something in the pipeline, and it defines hate speech according to how the UN it has the same sort of definition as the UN endorsed definition. And this is because nothing just stays online. Nothing just stays, in circles where people talk about things in WhatsApp groups and so on. People act on what they hear. And we see the consequences of this in countries like Kenya. We've seen, the consequences of hate speech. We've seen in Ghana the consistent language of discrimination, the consistent language of incitement to violence that is at the basis of hate speech. So it's not just somebody saying something that doesn't have followers. It's people in powerful positions saying it, and it gets picked up by journalists who hold the same beliefs in a lot of these countries. In Ghana, there's a big problem that we're trying to address, for instance, with the media in Ghana, where a lot of journalists have these anti-LGBTQI views that politicians hold and that have been pushed to that. The media has been part of the whole circle of hate in a country like Ghana and some others, Uganda and Kenya and so forth, and where the media then becomes the channel through which the violence is incited, because journalists hold the same views, and to be honest, in Namibia it's the same. When you look at some of the ways, I know of very homophobic, anti-LGBTQI plus journalists and editors. I know them. And if we start talking about, there's something happening or so on, Pride Month, for instance, how some of them would react in the newsroom. And this then becomes the view. Things are framed in a certain way to tell the story in a certain way, and the story that gets told is one that is, sort of borderline. It's not in our media. It's not really clear, but it becomes borderline discriminatory language. We in the media we haven't yet hit the hate speech threshold. Online, we're now starting to hit that threshold where we see the line being crossed. But this anti-gay feeling is in newsrooms, is in senior management. In your communities how people talk, and how pastors and so on. I've been. I've had now engagements over a number of weekends in some religious settings, and it's the things that are being said there. I think we've all heard these things, and these things, these narratives not just stay there; they influence people in the community. They influence people in the media, they influence people in politics. There's a concerted effort now from within the religious community to influence our politics. So, I think we're going to start seeing, especially now that we're moving towards the elections, the issue of gay rights, of LGBTQI rights in Namibia is going to become a political issue now.
Thank you, Frederico. The rest of our panel.
We are in an organization that deals with mental health, and one of the services that we offer is psychosocial support and counseling. And we had an opportunity to have very deep conversations with members from the LGBTI community, as well as friends and families of LGBTI community. And one of the main things or worrying things that came out is the online hate speech, the increase in online hate speech, and what effect it has on their mental health, what effect it has on their well-being as a human being. Because at the end of the day, we are all human beings, right? We are all equal and the same, irregardless of our genders, our sexuality. And it's very painful to see that some of these victims live in fear. They don't go out because, mind you, as much as they go through online hate speech, there's still stigma and discrimination out there. So for them to access the services in order for them to get the assistance to deal with this online hate speech is also very difficult out there. And online hate speech, if you look at it, it's the same as bullying. Everybody sitting here knows how bullying affected us when we were in school. It's just a different version that is now being used on social media, because we are all now on social media. But what makes it more bad and more worse is that it is something that trends, it goes viral. So anytime online hate speech happens, or someone is being attacked through online hate speech, through derogative comments, it just doesn't stay in that specific, it trends, it goes to countries. And obviously that person's personal space is invaded, that person's privacy is invaded. And what is the next thing? That person will start to withdraw from society, from community, because they wouldn't know how they should conduct or should carry themselves in community because of all this that is going on. The effect it has on the friends, the families, and children. There's now an increase where children from LGBTI communities, parents, are being bullied, are being victimized through online hate speech. And it has become so bad where it has ended up where the perpetrators will group up and then they will start an online hate campaign towards these children, the boy child and the girl child. And it has affected the mental health of these children to the point where some of them consider that suicide is the only alternative. Because pictures are made of them They are being put in a space where they come across as if they are weird, they are inhuman. Very derogative comments are made to them. These are kids that go to school. These are kids that are friends with our other friends. Now then, because of this hate speech, online hate speech, relationships are also affected in the process, whereby when they are going to school, some friends don't want to stay with them, and then they are isolated. So technically, if you isolate a person from someone, the first thing that person will start doing is that it will start affecting their mental health. This is when then depression comes in, different types of mental condition comes in, disassociative behavior comes in, bipolar disorder comes in, where you start hearing voices in your head. And at the end of the day, this will cause this specific person to even take their own lives, because they would feel it's the only way. And then they would even don't want to go to school. It has affected them by not going to school. There's a high dropout of learners who are having parents who are LGBTIQ, who don't go to school. Some of them have found comfort and coping mechanism by using alcohol and drug abuse, just so that they can fit in a community that is not discriminating against them. So this thing is really serious, and it is really affecting the mental and well-being of not just the LGBTI community as per se, but even the children, the family, the friends, the association, because those people are targeted online. They are literally made a target where, if, say for example, I am friends with Rachel, people know I'm friends with Rachel, they will come for me. And they will come for my children online. And some of the people might be people who are having high positions. They might be having key positions in community. Then they start targeting those people's professional characters. And then it starts affecting those people. What does it lead to? It leads to depression. And that is why we see a high suicide rate in LGBTI community nowadays, because sometimes that is the only route they think they can have. So I think for now, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, Florence, thank you so much. Quite very deep and real reflections on the experiences of LGBT persons, but also those significant others of LGBT persons and what they're experiencing. You also preempted what was going to be my next question. So I'm thinking, as I move to Rachel, perhaps you would ponder on the question of what can we do to mitigate some of these impacts that online hate has towards the mental health of LGBTQ plus persons and their significant others, and we can come back. And then Rachel, as you address my first question, perhaps just a little add-on. What do you think is the difference around online hate speech experienced by LGBTQ plus persons and other minority groups?
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. I'd like to echo what the previous speakers said. However, I want to tackle this issue from the perspective of LGBT people's existence in this country. Because online hate speech does not only speak to who I am, but it really draws back to the existence of me being part of a community where I constantly need to validate who I am as a trans person, for example, where I constantly need to navigate because there's hate speech around. So I really need to understand, if I sit in spaces with women, what language to use. Do I use a language that really addresses the issue of a trans woman that experiences hate speech on a different level? Or do I speak as a woman who is experiencing hate speech? But then also brings us back to a space where our coexistence within communities are questioned. Are we relevant to be in that space? Are we relevant to be in that community? Is our lives mattering in that space? Are our feelings, does it matter? Our voices, does it matter? Our contributions to the community, does it matter? For me, hate speech questions every aspect of my life as a trans woman, but also leaves me in a very vulnerable stage where I really need to look after my back, where I need to come to a stance to isolate myself from spaces, because sitting in a space where I feel it's hostile towards me as a transgender woman, where women has perpetuated, for example, hate speech online, and I need to speak about issues affecting transgender women. I cannot because of that particular issue. However, I think it is very important that when we look at hate speech, we just don't look at the identity of the person, but we look at the human aspect, as said by Florence. We are common by default by being human. And I think that particular aspect brought us to a space where, as individuals or as Namibians, we started dividing and grouping people, where we said they don't belong. They need to be treated in a certain manner. They need to live life in a certain way. There's an expectation, but also that communities or people, individuals who target communities that are then vulnerable to hate speech do have a tendency of really infringing on the rights of individuals. The right to freedom of movement, for example, gets infringed. Because many a times if I experience hate speech, I wouldn't really want to walk freely in town. I wouldn't want to associate. I wouldn't want to go clubbing, because that particular experience keeps on, echoing on the back of my mind to actually say, hey, Rachel, be careful. Hey, Rachel, this person is intending to. Whilst people do not have intentions, I think it creates a room for unintended intentions within the victim, and that draws back people from, living lives that they are supposed to live, but also enjoying their full constitutional rights within this country. Many times when we tackle issues, we really look into what we experience as LGBT persons, but we do not see the intersecting part of what our communities or how hate speech is then extended. But as a woman sitting here who identifies differently, I don't think that what I'm experiencing as a woman is different from what Florence experienced as a cisgender woman. I strongly believe the impact thereof and the message that is put across, that is what plays a critical role in terms of how the way it carries, but also the harm it can cause. And I believe that the distinction between the two of us would be that I am more visible as trans and as someone who identifies differently, someone who is not recognized in the country, versus her being recognized by law as someone who's normal and someone who is then, recognized within every system of this country. And therefore, the impact differs from her. She may get protection, but I may not necessarily get any protection. Interlinked with how do we really look at women versus trans women, but also how do we address the impact thereof? Is it psychological? If it's psychological, how can we deal that psychological issues of two women in a context that really addresses the psychological issue of hate speech towards women, and not necessarily look at minority or either marginalized or either trans or gender or sex. And I think it is important that our approach is not looking at the individual's identity, but it looks at women in general or at men in general and address the issue to the core.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. Also, very deep, reflective conversation you're having with us on impacts shared earlier by Madam Chisuku over here. So I'd like to come back to you on how we then try and mitigate some of these psychological impacts that online hate speech has.
Thank you so much for saying my surname out so well. There's always a struggle. Mental health is still something that still a lot needs to be done in terms of advocacy, raising awareness, and creating platforms for people to access services that can assist them with mental health issues. Now, one thing I've realized and what I've seen is that there aren't enough spaces or platforms that LGBTIQ communities as well as their friends and families can access in order to receive mental health, psychosocial support, and counseling. And that area itself is a very sensitive area because you need to be in an environment where you are understood, where there is empathy, and where you are given a platform where you can unpack, because some of these things are deep-rooted things. Some of this online hate speech and bullying, it's things that have been coming on for years. So it's something that a person deals with that ends up into trauma. So you cannot just get up and go and talk to anyone because it can cause more harm, it can cause more damage. So one of the things that can really be looked in is to create friendly psychosocial support counseling services that caters and offers services for LGBTIQ families in a family setup, as well as friends, as well as associations, as well as children of LGBTIQ. Reason being is that they will be able to relate more to someone who understands how to give the services out. Also, in addition, is that one of the things that we can also work towards too is to create more awareness by having dialogues, by creating safe spaces in the community where we share information. Same like mental health. When it started, a lot of people struggled to understand what mental health was all about, but we had to go out in the communities and educate communities on the importance, what causes mental health. Sometimes it's also the lack of not understanding certain things in the community, because remember, a thing grows by, I tell you, for example, this person is LGBTI, this person must be thrown out of the community. Because you are my friend, you support me. You just support me, just because I'm telling you. And then it grows. But what we can do is we can change the narrative, enter into the communities where we bring communities in smaller groups and start creating dialogues and conversations. Give them the real, raw experiences that LGBTI go through online hate speech. What does it contribute to? What does it cause? Because people need to understand, people need to see how it makes them sick through giving them mental health, how it makes them to lose their livelihoods, how it even ends up committing suicide, because one of those people that might be going through that situation might be your friend or it might be your relative, because you don't know how deep this aspect is. You were just part of an online hate crime of the community and hate speech of the community because you wanted to be on the good side of, like Rachel said, the so-called normal people. But if we can start somewhere where we take information to the community, I think we will be able to get something going and create counseling centers where LGBTI can access and have counseling. One very beautiful testimony I want to share is I met a phenomenal trans woman who was going through so many things because of hate speech, because of bullying, because of community bullying, so much. And that person was actually near to the point of committing suicide. And I think the first day we had a session, I think we sat for almost 6 hours, just for that person to open up and to talk. And you could see the trauma that that person had to endure over the years and everything that packed in that person. And after we were done, the person looked at me and said, "Do people like you really exist?" I said, "We do exist. We are there. We are just not visible, maybe because of fear that has been placed in you, and now you are afraid, but you are there." We had, I think, sessions up and down, and I can say that online hate speech has not changed. It increased, it intensified. Bullying in the community hasn't changed, but the assistance that that specific LGBTI person got in order to help with the trauma, how to cope. It made that person to be more stronger and come out more stronger. So these things work. Some of these things, you cannot root them out, but we can come up with a strategy and a plan to help so that mentally we'll be able to harness and work around this type of things that are happening in the community.
Thank you so much. I was about to say, Fred, you look like you are pondering. You have things you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for. I'm also a policy researcher, and one of the things I keep on looking for is data on, the prevalence. I keep hearing that there's an increase. Where can I see that data? I keep hearing there's an increase, and I know there's a research project currently going on, or about to start, around collecting data of actual violence, an increase in violence, because we're hearing there's an increase in violence in communities, but it's not reflected in police statistics. It's not disaggregated as a hate crime, for instance. It's just treated as a normal assault or whatever. It's not aggregated. This is a hate crime against somebody from the LGBTI community. And I mean, I'd really like to speak to you afterwards about, this increase in online hate speech and so on, because we need to use this. Because there's this narrative out there, and the politicians like using it, saying, nobody is discriminating. Nobody's committing violence against these people. Nobody is treating these people badly. What are they talking about? There's no problem in Namibia. It's because there's we can't point to data and say, no, actually, this is a problem. This is what the data says. There is an increase. If we look at the historical data, this is what it looks like. And there's this increase in online hate speech. Suddenly there's this increase in violent acts against members of the LGBTI community. If we can show that and show the public that, look, this is the consequence of what the politicians are saying. This is the consequence of what incitement looks like. This is the actual violence that is being committed. But this is an uphill task. I mean, the question you asked about, is there something different about this hate speech compared to, say, other marginalized communities? My feeling is yes. There is something different here. Because if you cut across communities, there's one thing they all have in common. They all discriminate. If I'm talking about our ethnic and religious and so on communities, if you cut across all of them, support some sort of discrimination against members of the LGBTI community. They are united in that. Whether it's your ethnic majority, ethnic minority communities, whether it's your language communities, cultural communities, your religious communities, all of them, a majority of them, would say that they are not supportive of, for instance, things like same-sex marriage, and same-sex relationships in general. That's something you'll find all of our communities sharing, all of our racial, ethnic communities, and so on. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting question. Even in our marginalized communities, if we talk about real marginalized communities, even in those communities, you'll find there's an LGBTI, anti-LGBTI view within these communities. I think a lot of it is driven by this narrative of values, of morals, of this religion-based. That all of a sudden we're all Christians in this country when it suits all of us. When there's an issue that unites us, and all of a sudden we all have Christian values and norms, and we based on these values and norms, we should be against this. They are only men and women. That's it. So it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question in this country.
Well, I mean, it's meant to probe, and I see your responses prompted the rest of the panel. So, Rachel?
I think there is need to work towards denormalizing hate speech. For so long as a community that is affected by online hate speech or either offline, we've normalized it, we have okayed it, we've said, okay, it's okay, it's fine. It's things we deal with on a daily basis. And I think there is need for us to really bring together the perpetrator and the victims, or rather survivors, have a sit around the table and have conversations around the impact it has, not only on the individual, but like Florence said, on the parents of their victim, on their children, and their spouses or partners. And I think that is really, really important, going back to the drawing board and really going back to the communities and have a voice of people that have experienced hate speech, give them a seat on a table, let them share experience. For me, sharing an experience carries more weight than someone who has not experienced online hate crime to speak of something they've not experienced. And I think that is where we need to go back to really have deep conversations of what it means to me as a trans person. You perpetuate hate speech towards me on any social media. And I think that interaction, that, how do you call it? This beautiful word, that professional or open and fair conversations needs to take place in this country, where we authentically and honestly have these conversations, where we really bring forth issues. Even if there's no data, there are victims, there are survivors, there are people who attempted and who has been a survivor of an online hate speech, who attempted to commit suicide, and they have survived through the help of others. And I think it is time we really create that space for dialogue, a space for sharing.
I think this is a democracy question. This is. I mean, I'm also a democracy researcher. I wear many hats. But this is a question of democracy. This is a question of Namibian democracy, folks.
Yes.
And understanding the Constitution. And yesterday, the front page of the Namibian, bottom of the fold, you had the leader of the IPC, Itula, because of the Supreme Court ruling and all the talk around LGBTI rights and same-sex marriage and so on, basically saying the Constitution was written by the West. The Constitution has now been dragged into this discussion. Now this implicates Namibian democracy. Because what this does is, what this shows us is that Namibians don't understand their own constitution. Namibians don't understand what human rights are.
Exactly.
And how we should live the human rights, the values, the principles of the human rights in our constitution. I think it would be very difficult to have the conversations you have, that you are talking about, because of the barriers between our different people in this country. I mean, we have a lot of barriers here, with language and cultural and so on, barriers. We have siloed ourselves. We're still in an apartheid mindset. A lot of that is still playing out in our society. And what this means is, our people, a lot of them are set in a mindset. They're set in a certain type of religiosity. I think if we address this from a constitutional, in a sort of a civic education way, where an example of human rights violations, the example you use of somebody being hate speech, driving somebody to try and commit suicide, surviving that, that's an example of We're talking about human rights, the violation of somebody's human rights, how this played out, and how we should address this. You work that into a civic education on human rights and democracy in the Namibian context, a constitutional discussion. Because those sorts of discussions that you're talking about, we have to be realistic in our country at this point in time. How many people would show up for those discussions?
If I maybe can just go back to something you said earlier in terms of there's so much being said that the increase on violence and on online hate speech is on an increase, but you don't see that data. Reason being is that most of the times, most of these sessions, or when we offer service to these communities that are the minority communities that are affected, we don't report them because of safety issues, because we have to protect them, because we feel there isn't really a platform, a space where we feel comfortable to bring these things out because of what they are going through. And now, when the information is out there, it looks as if there isn't any of these things happening, but while it's increasing, it's doubling every day, because we are dealing with the traumas of what they are going through. So our main focus is to help them not to commit suicide, is to help them deal with the drug and the alcohol issue that came in because of the bullying that started taking place in their lives. And then we keep that data to ourselves. But at the end of the day, then outside, nothing is being done because technically it looks as if there is no problem. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess also, Florence, you're answering the question from a mental health expert position.
Yeah.
I'd like to check with the activists. Is there a way that the movement tracks issues around online hate speech?
Before I get to that, I'd like to add on 2 points. The one where you asked, is the key population more targeted? Yes, we are. Because if 2 people living out of wedlock, or who hasn't wed, post a picture with their child, they're going to comment all the nice things. If me and my girlfriend post a picture, then they will say, oh, dimuna. You understand? So with other people, just because they are not part of the community, they can get away with sin. And the other thing is the Constitution and our rights. In Namibia, we are, in as much as we hold the Constitution dearly, we are also a very traditional country. So there's a big conflict between the traditional laws and the Constitution itself. So what the majority does is they pick what works for them. So with what they pick, they decide to, let me say, okay, they use that against us, just what they pick. But when we look at the Bible talks about so many things that the people get away with. But again, just because they're not part of the community, they're immune. But let me say, if like the woman who lured a 6-year-old for oral sex or whatever, if it was a gay man doing that, it would have been a big thing. But because she's not gay, or I cannot safely say she's not, but I'd like to believe so, yes, it's not getting as much attention that it should. Yeah, so I just wanted to add on those 2.
Because again, abuse is still abuse.
Abuse is still abuse, regardless of your sexuality.
Before I answer your question, madam, I still want to go back to my stance of really having conversations, and I'm going back to communities. Because I think there is need for sensitization, not only for people who identify differently, because they are the victims. Yeah, they are the receiving end, isn't it? I think there is need for us to really go back to our communities, sensitize them on human rights, yes, but also in that particular line, sensitize our communities on the impact of online hate speech. What is the impact? If I perpetuate online hate speech towards Florence, it's not only Florence that is impacted as an individual, it's all lesbian women that are impacted, for example, if it's towards a lesbian person. And if it's towards a trans woman, it's all trans women that are impacted, not only online, but also physically in the community. Because your hate speech does not stop online. It is materialized where I live as an individual, at my home where I rent, at my workplace, amongst my friends, not only friends that are heterosexual, but amongst friends that are also LGBT. Yeah. So I think that it is important that we really bring forth that understanding and cognizance amongst our people, for people to understand that if I violate, if I rape, for example, I'm just making an example, I'm just not impacting. The impact of rape is just not on Deyonce, but the mother, the father, the granny is impacted. They say either you are affected or infected. And I think it is important that we go back to certain things that has taught us lessons to really work towards mitigating. Question around tracking. I think as institutions or organizations, we really haven't tracked online hate speech, and I think this is a starting point. It is a building block for us to really work towards tracking. I think so for so many years we haven't seen the importance of tracking these incidences. It was, like I said, it was normal for us. It was like, dit is maar weer wandelines wat gesê word. It's fine. And we laugh about it. Yeah? Dit is maar weer Paulus wat dit sê, he normally says that. But it is important to track, even through that tracking, you would see how consistent Paulus is perpetuating online violence towards persons. And I think that for us is the basis of working towards something bigger and better that will maybe influence the IT policy that we have in this country, that we can really have as non-governmental organizations come up with a framework, not safety and security per se, but protection against online, hate speech. It's something that works towards collectively working towards something that protects, but also that creates awareness.
Yeah, I mean, just touching on that last point about what I said about the data.
Yeah.
It's something I've put to Positive Vibes. I think a few times, and said, you need to start collecting the data. Because evidence of hate, evidence of crimes needs to be presented so that you can put it to, if you're going to change something, you need to show people the scope and the nature of the problem. This is the problem. Here's the evidence. We can prove this stuff. We have the evidence, this is it. Now, you cannot deny the evidence, the facts, the truth. The policymakers, the lawmakers in parliament, the politicians, they cannot deny if you present them with hard evidence. They can do everything they like, but it shines a light on this is the situation in Namibia. The whole world can see what the situation is. Here are the facts, this is the truth. We need to start doing that. I've put this to Positive 5. I know there's a project about to start through one of the projects that I'm involved in that is going to start collecting data of violence in communities. Because this is what is needed at this point in time.
Having to address this issue, it comes back to me to actually say, I am. You are because I am. Yeah? And for me, it is not only the voice of, or rather, not only collecting data on those who are affected, but also collecting data on what people's opinions are out there and to why they perpetuate, hate crimes or hate speech online. So I think it is important that we get people's opinions. I may have a different opinion on why I do it. Someone may do it because Deyonce did it. So I think it is important for us to also have those analyses in terms of what community thinks about hate speech.
And one of the things that we need to start doing is why the evidence is necessary. Because what we want to do is when a hate crime comes to the police, it should be reported as that. So that we use the evidence to change law, to change practice, to change institutional mindsets. The evidence is what should guide us.
Exactly.
Not people's politics, not people's religions, not the evidence, the truth should guide us.
Yeah.
And so once we have that, we can then say, we would like to see the police, when this type of crime is reported, it should be reported as this. And then we can see, actually, in terms of crime statistics, this is what hate crime looks like in Namibia. This is what hate crimes against the LGBTI community looks like in Namibia. And that's why it's important that we have this. The thing I just remembered about what I wanted to say, the point I'd forgotten, yes, was we have to remember, folks, like bullying, hate speech is a symptom of what is offline. It is what we see on social media is just a symptom of a social problem. Something that is happening in the real world.
Exactly.
So if there's bullying, if there are people bullying other people online, it's a symptom of actual bullying happening in the real world, offline. If there are people, if you have people talking, using discriminatory language online, you can be sure that they're doing that sort of thing that they're talking about. They're doing that in the real world. So everything we see online is just a symptom of an existing real social issue that we need to address as a social issue. We can't address this online.
Absolutely.
You can't address your social issues online. You can only address your social issues in the real world. So fighting this online gets us nowhere. We need to fight it in our homes, in our communities, in our groups where we operate. This is in the real world. This is where we need to deal with these issues.
So I have a handful with a very passionate panel that seems to love to share. So I have two more questions for you left before I open the conversation up to the rest of the people to perhaps ask some questions, make some comments, interact with the panel. And I'm just going to throw them across because, again, Frederico touched on it a little bit. You are a human rights expert. So I'm looking at the two of you, particularly with this question around, are there currently any legal frameworks in place around online hate speech? What does the legal space look like if you're experiencing hate speech, right? And then generally across the board, where and how can we collaborate to sort of mitigate the effects of online hate speech experienced by LGBTIQ plus persons, and as you highlighted, their friends, family, and significant others?
Okay, I wanted to say something, but then
There's a lot happening.
Yeah, there was a lot happening. So I was just like, yeah, okay, I wanted to add on why we don't have data. It's because I think the LGBTIQ plus community has moved into a space where they can no longer just sit for something to happen. If this was happening 15 years ago, we would have been in a different position. But now we are in an era where we've decided to stand up and speak up because we've been waiting on somebody to speak up. We've been waiting on somebody to do something, but this is not, it's overlooked. And the other thing also is, after independence, when we inherited the sodomy law that was abolished, I don't think our constitution was revisited on that law because there were no people, there was no reason, let me say, because there were no arrests. People did not suffer the same violence they are suffering now. But now that there is so many alarming things happening, we are all giving this attention because, like I'm saying, if you don't stand up for yourself, no one is going to stand up. That's why all this is happening now. Yes.
Yeah, in terms of, is there a framework? No. There is something coming down the pipeline that was drafted by the previous ombudsman, They had a hand in the drafting, a major hand. So there is a hate speech hate speech and harassment bill. It's been coming on for a few years now. I don't know where the progress is with this thing. I know the LAC was involved in sort of consulting around the draft, but it has a very comprehensive definition of hate speech and what is, what would qualify as hate speech and so on. It still is a problematic definition. And the draft itself still is a rather problematic draft. But it's a start. There is this bill. Where it is, where this thing is floating around at the moment is, it's not happening.
How? So I was going to follow up with how best can the community try and influence?
So yes, so this is a pressure point that could be exerted. This is where an advocacy could now come in, given the rise, the rise in hate speech that you're seeing. To now use this as an advocacy point and say, we would like this specific law to be finalized, this draft to be finalized. We would like to see a substantive bill being tabled in Parliament. And to make proposals that speak to the reality of the community, to the definition, for instance, of what's in this draft. And to speak to people like the LAC, find out what they should have the latest draft. I think the draft I have is the latest draft, and see how you can influence that, push this forward, have this become, as an advocacy point, have this become something that people actually talk about, and recognize this is important for Namibia.
I believe that in order for us to be able to get a solution or to get something running, we need to come together as a collective and work in unity. We need all the key players to be part with different expertise, because here we would need different expertise. To come in one accord, we need to have a sit down, we need to discuss, so that each civil society that deals with these things has to come and bring their stories on the table, because we have our data, others have data. We cannot work in isolation. It will not work. It will just be a chaotic thing. And then come in and support those organizations that have the expertise, that have the resources, that can come in with a very powerful impact to assist with this in terms of funding, and then we can come up with something. We need to start somewhere, but we need to put our personal issues aside as civil society, and we need to come together and just have this conversation before it escalates. Yeah, I think I will end there.
I surely want to cement what you said by saying I think it is important that we bring forth voices of diverse people. And I must say we didn't only flag on the experience of LGBT people in regards to hate speech, but we also looked at other communities. And I think it is important to have women's organizations, men's organization, youth organization, the entire LGBT organizations and others to sit around the table and have this conversation and look at how each of these groups are affected by online hate speech, and then work towards how we can collaborate, on which areas can we really collaborate to push the agenda of anti-hate speech in this country.
Thank you very much. We are still discussing the experiences of LGBTIQ plus persons and online hate speech. My panel has deeply reflected that online hate speech has very negative impacts on LGBTIQ plus persons, particularly on their mental health. They've also shared a need for support systems and spaces to be established.
It's the same mindset. Because this is not, if you don't have the institutional recognition of what a crime is. If your police officers aren't trained on you, when this crime comes to your charge desk, this is how you treat it. This is the guidance on how you deal with this. If that doesn't exist, you get to a police station and they say, I mean, let's talk about the gender-based violence. We don't have a functional, a really functional gender-based unit in any police station in this country. None of our gender-based violence safe houses in this country. There's supposed to be one in every region. They exist. The physical properties exist, these houses. None of them are functional in any of our 14 regions. That is a mindset that you see reflected there. Gender-based violence is not an issue. If it was an issue, we would have functional safe houses for abused women and children. We don't. The only ones that exist are ones run by civil society organizations, by NGOs. The gender-based violence units are not operational on weekends. But that's when the violence happens. The mindset is one that this is not an issue. So we read about it in the newspapers on Monday and Tuesday, fills up the pages, and we're all, but looking at the institutional, the legal frameworks and everything, if we look at these things and say, we actually put this to the UN Human Rights Committee in April, the beginning of April, in the civil society report. We had a delegation there in Geneva, and this was part of our report. And they asked us about this. Why? And they asked us about it, and we spoke about it to the committee and and the committee then addressed it to the Namibian government delegation. Why are your gender-based violence units dysfunctional? Why are your safe houses not operational? It's the same mindset. So you have to make this part of police practice. And how you do is, I keep on coming back to the issue of data. Show them what the problem is. They cannot hide from that.
I think part of the reasons why we are being disregarded by the law enforcement officers is because when they look at you, whatever you say translates into, but she's doing an abnormal thing. This is a demonic thing. You see? They don't see beyond your label or how they are labeling you. So whatever you bring to them, it's not for them. It feels, they will even say it, God is punishing you for doing wrong things. So just go home, my sister, and change. You understand? So it's because they believe we are wrong. We are doing wrong things. So even if they have to take their docket or whatever, what case do they open? The woman and the woman who are in a relationship, for them, they think it's funny. So it is true. We need to bring those people into these spaces also, so they also start to understand, because these things are already not incorporated well within the Constitution and everything. So how about this person who's just doing their job? This person is supposed to work by their guidelines, whatever is guiding them. You understand? So now you feel this person's guidelines are probably saying, close the door when it's 10 o'clock, you come 11 o'clock and you want the door to be opened. It doesn't make sense. But if this person was to be told, in a case of an emergency, open the door, you understand? Then it would be different.
Yeah, I just maybe want to add something on the police. This might really sound a bit maybe funny, but we work very closely with the police. And I can tell you, a few years ago, when we started working with the police, we've realized that many police officers who are sitting in the police station don't even understand what is crime. Yes. They don't even know if you come and report something, whether it's a crime or not. or whether they refer you to the to the hospital, or they refer you to a social worker.
Yeah.
And in our region, and I think Rachel can back me up on this, we started where we had to go back and sit down with the police and educate them, by even bringing the Office of the Ombudsman to educate them on policies, on acts.
Their own policy.
Their own policies. Because we need to start somewhere. As much as we go toy, make noise at the police station, you are not doing your job. The reality is, you come there, you look at someone, you think this person is literally a spruce, but this person really doesn't even know what you're talking about. And that is how we started. And we went further to bring the gatekeepers and to hold them accountable. Who are the gatekeepers? Our councillors, our governors, our regional commanders. Any gatekeeper in a region wants to see a region that is growing. They don't want to see a region that is in the newspaper every day for all the wrong reasons. And they know that for them to be able to get the community and them to meet halfway, they need civil society. They need us activists to act as a barrier between them and the community. And we go and talk on behalf of the community that, yes, we have different types of diverse groups. We've got LGBTI, we've got ABCD, we've got this strap, but at the end of the day, we want to see one thing, and that is growth in the community and minimizing of crime. And we want to see people coming to the police station and feeling freely to report cases, and they are taken seriously. And it's working. And we started a movement, which we call the Social Support Cluster, which is chaired by the governor. And we, on that group, there's the regional commanders, there's key stakeholders, and we actually have, if something is done in the community, whether Rachel calls me, Rachel knows me, Rachel calls me, Florence, A, B, C, and D happened to one of our people, I said, okay, give me time, I'll call the regional commander straight. And then it's sorted out. We can start somewhere. But at the end of the day, we also need to bring our part by also meeting them halfway to say, okay, maybe this person really doesn't understand. Let's come in, let's educate them. Because once you give them the information, you can actually use that information against them. Because if you come there and you know what is the act, they cannot say, I cannot assist you. Because you tell them, but it is my human rights. The gender-based violence policy says that if I'm being emotionally or financially abused, it's a crime. So you need to go and pick up that person. So sometimes you need to use their own tools against them in order to get a message across.
Thank you very much. My English is really poor. I like to talk in my language.
Okay.
Okay, I having only a comment. On the halo kukomenda kombinga.
Yeah.
On the halo kukomenda kombinga yo community. Sha no community. Emotion and dramas. Oh, yeah. Say on our community it's very difficult to speak out because we're dealing with a lot of problem. I comment here kucha ngenge ote hapo kucha otuna okangudu oko hakaimo katikano.
Don't worry, she'll translate for us.
Takakalonga anu. Okangudoko takaimo katikanu takakalonga anu. Then atuningisha. Okulongasha onu oshima shafimana. Ondilia pandi popyo shuambu. Mala anu abeshaba velio mota atakuma. Kwame is feeling emotion. You understand? It's not all of people stand up and talk her mother language, but she's together among of the people educated. You understand? For me, I like this. To educate someone, you do something. Like the point you are talking now, the police officers. I'm an Ebudwat. Yesterday, on the indina onklu kadi ongelelo. That woman is not swakop, but she's mental. I called the police officer 5:30. until I call President Nangolombuba. Then they come to assist me. I'm a woman. They come to assist me 12:30. This is really, this meeting is very important. Let us go to the community and teach. If you report something, do something against that person. And they come, Ma'am Elizabeth, I say, ndaloloka.
I'm tired.
I'm not having a uniform because of what? I don't have grade 10. How can I come to employ a police officer? But I like my community. I can assist where I can assist. We have a trauma. Really, we have a lot of people in the community. They deal with trauma. And they don't know where they must go. How can they go to talk? Ngengo ndaipo ponma ndipo pineno shingiri otapo pe shingirisa ile otapo pi kandi shikucha andi ndipo ikandi kwen ya ina halo kukwa felangi. But they are laughing, you understand? Like a man, they say my woman beat me. It is not easy.
So basically, if I can remember correctly, what she said is that she's a member of the community. She's part of the neighborhood watch. And she is not articulated in English. And then sometimes when she comes to meetings like this, she feels embarrassed because she doesn't understand and she doesn't speak English. Oh, sorry. And one of the things that she also said is that if she now, who's in the community and she's passionate in the community, they have a group and they want to go into the community to educate and to share information to people. It will be a good thing also if the information shared is done in vernacular languages. Because many people who are sitting in the community don't understand, they don't have the information because they don't understand English. So now if the information is coming, people are just sitting, filling up spaces, nodding their heads, but they didn't hear or they didn't understand anything. So like her now in her experience where she feels that this type of meetings to go in the community so that more of this advocacy and awareness is shared can also be done in other languages. And she also emphasized to say that she had an experience where she had a woman who was mentally disturbed, I think a day or 2 days ago, where she asked assistance from the police and they delayed to come up until she went as far as called the president, Nangolo Mbumba. So that I think the president ordered the police and only then did she get an assistance. So that's basically.
Thank you, Florence, for assisting with the translation. I think what we're getting today is that it's very important to have community-centered approaches when we're responding. I think it is also very important to consider the lived experiences and realities of communities at the center. I think there have also been very distinct policy recommendations made here, starting off with what has already been developed and the community looking at that in-depthly, trying to define it for themselves and then advocating for the inclusion within current regulation that is being developed. I think we've also been able to assess that the impact of online hate speech and hate speech in itself has very huge impacts on LGBTIQ plus persons, but not only them, their significant others, family members and friends. I think we've also shared that it's very important to create platforms and provide space for people to be able to process said trauma. I'd like to thank all my esteemed panelists for joining me today, for your valuable time, for your continued contributions to not only the LGBTQ plus communities, but other communities that you work in and the spaces that you take up. Thank you so much to our community for joining us. It has indeed been an interesting conversation trying to understand the impact of online hate speech, particularly shaped towards the LGBTQ plus community. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay.